The president of a publicly funded women's group suggests the idea of banning heterosexual relationships. I'm Marco Perry. Welcome to the Perry Platform. Today's story really is the epitome of nonsense, and I want to give some aspect of the benefit of the doubt to the person in question, but she makes it very hard for me to do that. So, the National Post writes, funding for a women's group is under review after they call for a ban on men and women relationships. So, the women's group in question is based in Quebec, and it's called the Fédération des Femmes. So, what's this talk about banning men and women relationships? Their president, Gabrielle Bouchard, is the one who had this brilliant idea. Now, to be fair, she may or may not speak for the entire organization. Condemning her idea here and condemning the entire group, they're not synonymous, and you might not want to go that far. I'm sure there are great people who are working in that group towards some good causes, but their leader really is something else, and we're going to highlight that for you right now. She put out a tweet saying that heterosexual relationships were violent, mostly based on religion, and possibly should be banned. Wow, the wokeness is strong in this one. So let's try to take that argument apart. Her first claim, heterosexual relationships are violent. Well, the fact is they can be, like any other relationship between people. That's definitely not unique to straight people. In fact, if she took a second to look up some stats, she would find that gay and lesbian couples also encounter violence. Shocker, right? The facts of the matter are that it's an unfortunate reality, but some studies find that lesbian relationships in particular have higher rates of abuse in general when you compare it to the typical population. Now, her first point is a total fail. Let's go on to number 2. Heterosexual relationships are mostly based on religion. No. What do you think happens with atheists or people who are not religious? Do they suddenly become gay or something like that? What about the time prior to religion? People existed before that. The reality here is that heterosexual relationships are arguably mostly based in science, not religion. See, I didn't choose to be straight. I made no such decision. Religion didn't influence that either. Studies show that being gay follows a similar pattern. These are phenomena beyond your immediate control. There are some type of biological aspects in your body that tell you which type of gender is going to be most attractive to you. Religion is not the backbone to that. Religion does not explain why I or you may be attracted to the opposite gender. It really makes no sense here, and she might have had a point if she said that most people are getting married because of religion. See, there's a little bit more logic, it being a fundamentally religious tradition, but here, saying that men getting together with women and vice versa is religious is complete nonsense. I don't know how she can actually seriously put that out there. So, based on her premise, if religion really is mostly why people enter these straight relationships, the religious people have something to be thankful for. They enable humanity to exist according to her train of thought. How does she believe babies are made? There isn't anything wrong with being gay, but to think that we would mostly be gay without the influence of religion at our back, that's completely unfounded. This point is also a fail. Then, her final argument. Heterosexual relationships should possibly be banned. This type of thinking is what I'd expect from a 3-year-old. It's purely based on emotion with no respect for the proper consequences. So, let's humor her for a second and say that she gets what she wants. She creates a world where men and women can no longer be together. What happens? Let's think about it. Probably within 60 to 80 years, the entire human race finishes. That's it. We all go extinct because we can no longer reproduce. She is saying that men and women cannot be together, have that enforced by law. So I presume the only type of relationship you can get into is men and men, women and women. Now, maybe you get saved because scientists can artificially impregnate you, but let's say that's not part of the equation. Well, that's it. Goodbye, humanity. We are finished. And you can actually make the argument that this woman's idea would have orchestrated the largest genocide in human history. I'm not too sure if she appreciates the gravity of that, and even beneath all these consequences, the fundamental fact here is that she doesn't have the right to dictate who gets to be with who. Two consenting adults who like each other should be free to engage in the relationship that they want. Maybe even more than two if you're into that, but whatever. She has no place to insist based on any type of rationale that she thinks that she has, that being straight automatically denies you the opportunity to form a relationship with someone of the opposite gender. It's a complete nonsensical argument, and I'm sure if it was reversed, she wouldn't agree with it. There is no logical consistency to be applied here. A shocking factor that compounds all of this is that her rant here isn't just a one-off situation either. Last year, she suggested that men should be forced to have a vasectomy when they turn 18. And I don't know, based on her recommendation, she seems pretty hellbent on stopping the spread of the human population. She seems to be keen on the idea of killing off the entire human race within the next 100 years or something like that. She is what I would call literally insane based on the ideas that she is putting forward. These ideas are begging for genocide. If you take these claims seriously, well, I don't know what to tell you. She's the president of this women's group, but to me it seems like she's more fit to be the president of something like Crazy Town. Just the way she's thinking isn't making much sense here. The ideas being put out do not seem to represent someone who is acting rationally. Now, the government saw this, like her ranting, and they basically said, oh snap, we're funding somebody with pretty maniac ideas. They are now reevaluating their $120,000 of public funding commitment that was being sent to the group. You should also note too that this organization is the biggest women's federation in Quebec. They're not some small organization. They have a lot of scope and a lot of power. Now, Bouchard tried to defend her tweet after that, saying that it was a reaction to something in the news. There was a story about a man killing his female partner. Now, multiple things can be true at once here. That story was indeed a tragedy, and that guy deserves to go to jail. Violence between spouses or partners is a major issue. You also cannot judge the entirety of heterosexual relationships based on that. She's also trying to play the, oh, it was a burst of emotion card, when clearly it's not the case. Like, no. You've been on record calling for things like mandatory vasectomies of men when they turn 18. Drop the charade. Now, a couple hours after all of this, her initial absurd tweet, she then goes on to say something along the lines of femicides are an issue and they need to be taken seriously. And here we can agree. Of course they are. Nobody is arguing against that. Why couldn't actually she just have said that from the beginning without the previous rant? Killing girls is what femicide is really about, and it's disgusting. You shouldn't be killing anyone simply based on their gender or because you perceive them to be vulnerable. We can all rally around that. Any rational citizen of Canada can say, yes, that is an agreed upon thing. That's an agreed upon notion. We don't want that to continue to be a thing, and we want to work to reduce it. Now, these woke people, like the president, presumably, do it themselves a disservice by being insufferable. If that's your message, that femicide is bad, that's great. We should all rally around that and support the idea. But then you add in sprinkles of something like banning straight relationships and vasectomies being forced upon people, and you lose the populace. They think you're crazy. People who would have supported you otherwise start to lose hope in your mission because you come across as a maniac. If you're truly about this mission here, advancing women's rights and stopping things like femicide, keep it strictly to that. Don't add in the woke particles that are going to divide the populace and make some of them go against you. From an organizational strategy standpoint, it's a massive failure. Then, after some time, Bouchard goes on to apologize after getting torn apart online from citizens and government officials. She says it was out of place and hurt many people. Now, I don't think there were too many people who were actually hurt. It seems to me more likely that people were appalled by how something this insane can be said by the president of a major organization. But anyways, she deeply apologizes, blah, blah, blah. It's basically the typical scripted apology he's delivering. Now, I'm not too sure if she really is sorry and willing to change the way she thinks. Maybe she is. I'm willing to give her the benefit of the doubt. But it seems to me that the government threatening to pull funding gives her a little bit more incentive to apologize. She's right that domestic violence truly is an issue, and we should work towards reducing it as much as possible. But to suggest the answer is to literally stop heterosexual relationships, it is beyond silly. That is no solution, and I want to take it as a joke, but she has been on record calling for things like these mandatory vasectomies. Now we get to this issue of funding. Is it right to penalize the entire organization for the supposed incompetence of the leader? That's a good question to ask here, and as I said, I'm not too sure the two things are related. The organization is probably doing a lot of good work, and the leader doesn't speak for everybody. At the same time, though, she is the leader of the organization and she sets the culture. She has the utmost power in that group, and she is definitely going to be influencing people. And the cherry on top, when it comes to taxpayer money, you can't be that biased. You're working for all people. Everyone's paying their taxes into that, and you're using that money. You are not a private organization. You are held accountable to the people. You can't be going on maniac rants given those conditions. In fact, the article writes that this group, the feminist organization, has moved in a way that was considered a radical direction under this new president. They have alienated certain feminists, and that's unsurprising to me. The fact of the matter is that if you are taking public money, you need to be accountable to the public. If you want to advance women's rights, then stick to that. She's trying to tear down the social fabric. You can't really be a radical loon looking to sow division, and if you want to do that, go for it, but not on the public's dollar. If I were a Quebec citizen and I knew that my tax money was being used by this lady as the president of the organization, I don't know how much faith I'd have in the government's judgment. My tax dollars going towards things like a mandatory vasectomy campaign and paying for whatever type of propaganda that she might be putting out, I don't know. It doesn't make sense to me. I actually would love to have Bouchard on my show for a discussion. I truly want to better understand how someone can think like that, or if she's just playing around, or what the case really is. This is an open invite if she ever stumbles across it. And now we get to a very important part that I have to highlight. I have to say that nobody should personally harass this lady by doing things like DMing her or trying to dox her, expose her personal information online, get a mob going to do whatever, attack her or something like that. Cancel culture is toxic. And even if she clearly is wrong in this regard for saying these things, we don't know everything about her, and there has to be given an opportunity for her to reconsider her stance, and it has to be extended in good faith. Don't be that person who is going to be outraged and try to bring about hell on earth for this lady. You don't know much about her personal circumstances, and we're not even too sure how she arrived at these ideas. It might just be that she's been indoctrinated herself or something happened in her life. We just don't know. The thing that complicates the matter a little bit is the fact that taxpayers are funding the organization, but there's a difference between attacking ideas and attacking a person. You can think that what she said is stupid. You can call it out as much as you want, but to personally try and attack her, to do that, I think is crossing a line. We don't want that nonsense here. And to be doing something like as well, calling for her to lose her job and whatnot, we don't know the circumstances of her family, who that's going to affect, if we're going to be hurting children as a result of what she said. Whatever the case may be, let's simply stick to the realm of ideas. Let's attack the ideas, dissect them, and prove why they're bad, and maybe she can learn from that. Maybe after all of this talk, she can realize that what she's saying is bad, and she can improve for the future. That would be a great thing for everybody. And now, my final point. There are some people who are downplaying this entire debacle, and for those people who think it's not even worth talking about and whatnot, ask yourself this. Would you downplay things if it was the other way around? It's quite the interesting thought experiment to test out. I'm not saying we need to take her with the utmost seriousness. I'm actually laughing at this entire thing myself, but what if she was a man who was calling for mandatory pills to be taken by women so they can't reproduce? That's probably the equivalent of the forced vasectomy. Would you be out there saying, her body, her choice? Would you be enraged by that because it's a man? But now you have a woman calling for a similar thing on men to literally chop some cords on their private part so they cannot reproduce. Is that something that you condone, or is it worth talking about? Is there some seriousness in that suggestion that is worth calling out? Or even, in another example, what if they called for the banning of any other type of relationship? She targeted heterosexuals this time, but what if it was another type of arrangement between consenting adults? Would it still be all good then? Or would more people be freaking out? What I'm trying to get at here is that we need to apply a layer of logical consistency so we can weed out nonsense while controlling for personal bias. If something is wrong for one person, it should be wrong for everyone. That is the standard we should be seeking. Justice is blind. This is where something like the ideology of intersectionality fails. It cannot do that. It actually encourages you to indulge in bias and view things from the opposite of a universal lens. That's one way to end up with a way of thinking like Bouchard. It's one way to end up as a polarized individual. These notions of group thinking, tribalism, and whatnot, they have to be outgrown. When you don't work towards creating a universal standard, a clear level of consistency, all you do is create a breeding ground for conflict. Some group is going to feel undermined and they're going to believe that another group is doing the undermining, whether it's true or not. These things that we're seeing today, trends of things like the victimhood Olympics, intersectionality, they are not going to bring us to a more prosperous human future. And now you're also adding in levels of wokeness as we've seen from this president and the different ways the media and people are viewing the actions here. Without a level of consistency, we are setting ourselves up for failure and at the mercy of total bias, confirmation, and whatnot. We have to strive for a more objective level of reasoning here. So, that now brings me to the end of our conversation for today. If you enjoy the content, be sure to leave a review and share. That'll help us grow. And you can find me on Twitter and Instagram at PerryPlatform. Thanks for joining me, and I'll see you soon.